Everyone has ambition that the current them just isn't capable of. Video games, even simple ones, tend to become one of those ambitions, so we use game engines. Vehicles capable of taking us further than we could ever go with our strength alone. Yet just like shopping for a car, just picking one is a journey within itself. Years ago, the best indie game engine was Unity, and Unity has only gotten better over the years, but the competition is fiercer than Game of Thrones, and the crown that's been snuggled up on Unity's head isn't as well guarded as it once was. Rather than defending their throne, Unity has been trying to expand their kingdom. They improved the engine, created a plethora of different packages, and expanded towards the automotive industry. Nope, it's right. The automotive industry. Unity's efforts to expand to the land of Hyundai and Ford while building the data-oriented technology stack turned the engine into a boiling pot of pure chaos, which made the kingdom susceptible to an invasion. So other kingdoms began taking some of the land that Unity had worked so hard to obtain. A good example, Unity used to have the most generous license for a viable game engine. Fast forward to the modern day, Godot exists, and it's free. Like, super free. Like you spend $0. Free. Like stop looking for the strings, Pinocchio, you're a real boy. Free. On top of that, Unreal's license is now even better for indies than Unity's was. When you look into this, it gets pretty dramatic. Unreal basically changed their license so that you don't have to give them money until you make $1 million a year, in reaction to Unity's license, which is you don't have to give them money until you make $100,000 a year. They 10x'd Unity. On top of that, Epic, the game company behind Unreal Engine, gave Godot, Unity's main free 2D competition, a bunch of money. The game industry is looking pretty cutthroat, which is kind of nice for us because our place in this relationship is basically,
you boys gonna fight over the little me?
I really need to find a more relatable analogy. Moving on, value is only one variable of many when it comes to picking a game engine, and kind of like finding Waldo, sometimes having too many variables contributing to your decision actually stops you from getting to the answer. So we'll be focusing in on a few key factors, precisely engines that excel at certain types of games, their learning curves, and how complete the toolboxes are for making games. Then I'm going to give you the secret sauce, a secret blend of herbs and spices that'll help you regardless of which engine you pick. So let's discuss which engine rules over which lands, so you can get out there, plot your course, stick your flag into the grounds, and conquer your way into game dev glory. If you were to ask me to simplify this entire choice to one crucial factor, it would be graphics. After all, game engines are like a relay race, where a large team has done part of the work of making the game, and they pass the baton on to you so you don't have to work with a large team, which is really important to some of us because some of us have no friends.
Come on, toughen up.
Perhaps the largest benefit in terms of work hours that's been done for you inside of a game engine is the graphics. So a lot of picking a game engine can be decided by whether you are making 3D games, 2D games, or both. If your answer is both, then I would like to present Unity as the Leonardo da Vinci of game engines. Now, just to put this in context for all those that think good old Leo's resume only has the Mona Lisa on it, he also painted The Last Supper, he pieced together a lot of anatomy through borderline necromancy, he almost invented a bicycle, several interesting war machines, and a helicopter, and he is one of the reasons why we use the term Renaissance man to mean a multi-talented individual. Now, Unity is basically the Renaissance engine. It is good at both 2D and 3D, so if you want your skills to go across to both, then it's likely the best engine for you. Some of you might be questioning if Godot might also fit this. It depends on how far you're going with the 3D. Unity is the better choice most of the time, and it gets pretty technical as to why, and I don't even fully understand it because I'm not a game engine developer. However, the gist is this. The way that engines develop graphics is through the use of a graphics API like DirectX or OpenGL. Now, different operating systems work better with different APIs. DirectX, being a Microsoft solution, means that it works better with Windows. Metal, being an Apple solution, means that Apple products tend to work better with it. In fact, in some cases, Apple products will only work with Metal. In other words, if you want the best 3D performance, then you need to have a way for your engine to utilize the correct API for the correct device. Unity, Unreal, and most other large engines have that ability. Godot does not. not. It's coded with one API, OpenGL, and it will move to Vulkan, but even then we're not sure if it's going to be able to contend with the other engines, which already have Vulkan capabilities. Now in the 2D world, performance is a lot easier to obtain, so we don't need to worry about this as much. Alright, let's forget the technicalities and sum this up. Leonardo da Vinci was a beast, and Unity is most likely the best choice if you want to work with both 2D and 3D. Now, if 2 dimensions just isn't enough to tickle your game making fancy, then the game engine you want to use becomes a little more complicated. More game engines will come out for the challenge than a fresh load of Super Smash Bros., but if you weed through all the competition based on the engines that are battle tested in the indie community, and you also filter them based on if they have a large enough community built around them to teach you how to use that engine, cause let's be honest, none of us are going to read the documentation, that leaves Unreal and Unity as the 2 real contenders. A year or 2 from now, CryEngine, Unigine, or Godot might actually offer some real competition, but for now, in 2020, the real choices are Unity and Unreal. With Unity being able to do 2D as well, why would you not pick Unity over Unreal? If I were to go in depth into all the reasons, that would be a video in of itself, so here's the bullet point version. Unity is the least complete engine that I'm talking about today. Please understand me, you can make a complete game with Unity, no problem. When you compare the engine against other engines, it is lacking a lot of tools that others come with out of the box. Unity is catching up by working on visual scripting and finally including a shader graph, but they still lack behavior trees, 2D pathfinding, and a big thing, for some reason, Unity technologies just cannot maintain a networking solution. Their track record is starting to become embarrassing. Fingers crossed, the Dot solution is in preview and it will hopefully be good, but you might want to look into third-party solutions if you're going for a multiplayer game, or you might want to go with Unreal. Another point, Unity takes more work to get the same results. They don't have beautiful graphics without some tinkering, whereas Unreal, you make the game and it's pretty. Period.
Alright, so this is what I would achieve in Unity after spending like 20 minutes, which I did in 2 minutes in UE4.
Which might be the fruition of some underlying design principle for both companies, because a lot of Unity implementations tend to make things more difficult for the developer rather than easier. Dots, the scriptable rendering pipeline, and the new input system all require learning new workflows to gain the new advantages, whereas Unreal introduces features like Nanite, which allows you to forget about poly counts. In other words, Unreal Engine just does more work and you do less over time. Unreal has a lot going for it in the 3D world. It's far better tested in all things AAA, meaning the better graphics you are using, the more likely something similar has been made with Unreal Engine. Blueprints, the visual scripting solution in Unreal, is a first-class citizen of the Unreal Engine. You're meant to make games with it. It's built and maintained by Epic, so it's probably the best out-of-the-box visual scripting solution in the 3D world. If visual scripting is your thing, Unreal is probably your engine. We've thoroughly pummeled Unity's reputation to a pulp that's strangely similar to EA. Why would you pick Unity over Unreal? Again, bullet point version. Unity is the Renaissance engine. You can do 2D as well. In fact, if it's another game type, Unity will be one of the first to support it. The workflow for text-based scripting is better in Unity. It compiles faster. It's C# versus C++. It's just better. In case you don't understand the compile time thing, when you finish making a change to Unreal scripts, you have to wait anywhere from 5 seconds to 2 minutes based on your computer and how much you've scripted. It doesn't sound like a big deal, but when you're working on a game, it can be a pain to have a minute-long load time every time you make a 5-second change while fixing a bug. Not as big a deal if you're using Blueprints because it compiles much faster, so if you're going with visual scripting, that can completely negate this whole bullet point. Another reason you might want to pick Unity is their asset store, because it is amazing. There are some solutions on there that can save you months or even years of development time. I can go on for days about some of the greatness inside the asset store, so if you're going to drop money on third-party solutions anyway, then Unity is probably your engine. Final point, Unity's community is just larger, and in the community world, bigger is better. You can find tutorials about almost anything, so if your eyeballs are offended by one guy, then no problem. There are plenty of fish into YouTube, just search for what you want, then boom! a new, more eyeball-pleasing existence is upon your screen. In the end, there isn't a perfect choice. If I had to break it down to a singular point, I would say it's whether you plan to spend money on this or not. Unity just has a lot of good assets, and anything that comes with Unreal you can purchase for Unity. However, if you felt yourself starting to get into a panic attack every time I've mentioned money, then go with Unreal. It comes with so much out of the box, and its visual scripting is really good, plus the templates that it has are excellent. Summing up, I don't think you can go wrong with either choice, even their weaknesses are still greater than other engine strengths. If everything we've talked about so far has one too many dimensions in it for you, then it's time to really talk about the best 2D game engines. Let's start by talking about the outlier, the most specific game engine on this list, RPG Maker. A quick disclaimer, they're in the midst of releasing a new version, so by the time you watch this, RPG Maker MV might be RPG Maker MZ instead, but from my research that won't change anything I'm talking about. Now, unless you're a detective, this might surprise you, but RPG Maker is great for making RPGs. However, that comes with some caveats. If you're not looking to make money with this, if you just want to get your story out there, if you don't mind that people will only be able to play it on the PC because you'll never be able to port it to a console, then there is no engine that can take your vision and turn it into a full-blown game as easily as RPG Maker. Now, the guy that made To the Moon could easily take a hot steaming dump all over my opinion of the engine's restrictions. However, I would still argue that if you look at the most complicated game that's been made with RPG Maker, and you look at hobby projects made with Unity, the hobby projects have things going on that RPG Maker couldn't dream of. Trying to do something beyond an RPG with RPG Maker is like trying to turn a Prius into a street racer. Theoretically possible, sure, but so is building a car from scratch. Don't get me wrong, a Prius has its place, as does RPG Maker, and RPG Maker's place is for the person that wants to release a story-based RPG and doesn't really want to make money by making video games. If you want to leave the money-making door open to yourself in the future, then RPG Maker is probably not the engine for you. GameMaker Studio 2, Godot, and Unity all give you a much better toolset to build a wide range of games with. Better yet, the skills from any of those three somewhat translate to one another, whereas the skills from RPG Maker are often lost in translation. So I recommend for those not doing RPGs to look between GameMaker Studio 2, Unity, and Godot. When choosing between them, I found the crucial factor here to be the scope of your game. Is it small, less complicated game, medium sized, or you'll spend half a decade and not finishing it? GameMaker Studio 2 is great for small to medium sized projects. Again, the guy that made Hyper Light Drifter could take all of my opinions and build a toilet out of them. However, look through GameMaker Studio 2's showcase and you'll see a certain scope of game. And every time a game pushes against that scope, you won't see them get much further. Heartbeast, a guy who built his YouTube channel with GameMaker tutorials, decided to switch to Godot once he started actually producing games that he was releasing.
Well, my favorite is actually Godot. I think mainly because of the kinds of games that I want to make.
You'll find similar stories throughout YouTube, which brings us to Godot, probably the best 2D engine in terms of its ability to scale to different size projects. It's simple to start with, free, open source, free, has an interesting structure that helps to visualize code, free, picking up a ton of pace in the indie community, free, and good from small games to large games. And I make tutorials for it, and they're free. However, the trade-off for all its free open source glory is that it can't do the work for you with porting to consoles. The SDKs that the console companies own are proprietary and therefore incompatible with open source, but not incompatible with you doing it yourself. Going to consoles is an easier journey, not easy, but easier on both Unity and GameMaker Studio 2. You might not be able to handle that journey by yourself with Godot, but if you just want to release to Steam, then you don't really have to care about this. Also, a lot of people want to start on PC, see how they do, then use that money to port to consoles. There are companies that specialize in porting Godot games. For medium to large projects, Unity does really well. At this point, Unity has been a part of every discussion, so it can feel like I'm favoring them, but I'm not. The reason they've been so intrusive in this video is the same reason that they've been king for all this time. They are the Swiss Army knife of game engines. There is no situation you can get in that they cannot MacGyver their way through. However, you'll always wish you you had your actual toolbox with you. Unreal, Godot, GameMaker Studio 2, and RPG Maker all do a much better job of feeling like specialized tools to professionally get the job done. But you can use the asset store to make Unity into an even more specialized tool that can make very, very specific games. But it can feel like you're piecing together a Frankenstein solution. It's an unstoppable monster when it works right, but making it come alive is an achievement within itself. Now, of course, you can build Unity or any of these other game engines into doing anything really, but then again, you could just build a game engine from scratch using just C++ and SDL, or you could even break everything down and just use assembly. The point here is you're using a game engine to save yourself time and maybe money. If time is the main issue and money isn't really that big of a deal, then Unity becomes a pretty good bet. You buy an asset to give you a good foundation to start with, and then you just buy something when it will save you more time than you want to spend on a feature, like procedural generation for instance. If money is more important, then Unity shows its ugly side, because it takes either more time or money with Unity to get momentum going. This is the reason why it's not very good for small games. This is subjective, but I found that GameMaker Studio 2 and Godot both have better workflows for 2D than Unity, meaning I feel like I can get more done in either of those engines than Unity, which is crazy because I have more experience with Unity than both those other engines combined. A developer named DevDuck on YouTube had a similar experience switching from Unity to Godot.
In this video, I'm going to try and take the 6 months of progress I've made in Unity on my indie RPG and evaluate what it's like to build out those same features and systems in the Godot engine. And to be clear, I'm not aiming for 100% feature parity or even close to that. For the sake of being smart with my time and not totally derailing development of my game, I'm limiting the duration of this experiment to about a week. So, with all that said, where have I landed and what does the future look like for Dolphin? I will be continuing development of Dolphin with the Godot engine.
This is after 6 months of development. Basically, I believe Unity is the best engine if you're willing to spend money on it, because so many great asset developers are out there that basically turn Unity into different game making powerhouses. However, if you are not spending money in the asset store, I think the best engine is between Godot and GameMaker Studio 2. GameMaker Studio 2, if you're planning on doing a console release and it's not going to be a really large game, Hyper Light Drifter is about as big a game as you want to make in GameMaker Studio 2, and that game really pushed the engine. Godot scales better, it's super free, and I've understated how great of an engine it is. As a side note, if your video game making dreams involve the App Store or Google Play, then any of the engines can play a supporting role for you. Again, I would like to point out how free Godot is, whereas GameMaker Studio 2 costs money. Unity is also free up until you make a certain amount of money, but they force a splash screen before your game, basically saying made with Unity, which might as well be saying this game sucks, because that's the reputation that splash screen gives your game. If you buy into one of their premium subscriptions, then you don't need to put that splash screen on your game, but then you're not using the free version of Unity anymore, and the argument for Godot becomes bigger and better. Let's go back to a bird's eye view over this topic. When picking a game engine, it's important to talk learning curves and transferable skills. Again, RPG Maker has probably the smallest learning curve on this list, however, it has the least transferable skills. In other words, using RPG Maker won't help you much with learning other game engines. Every other engine that I've talked about will give you skills that translate much better to other engines. Talking about the other engines, from easiest to hardest in my experience and in most popular opinions, GameMaker Studio 2 is the easiest, Godot, Unity, Unreal. 2D is easier than 3D, so if you're using Unity to build a 2D game, then it's probably easier than using Unity to build a 3D game. In fact, it's probably easier to build a 2D game in Unity than it is a 3D game in Godot. There's just a lot of extra stuff to 3D that you don't need to use in 2D, like lighting and IKs. You can use some of that stuff, but you don't need to. Something that is quick in 2D, like animation, might take a while in 3D. Although the skills you gain from GameMaker Studio 2 are transferable, a lot of people have found that the switching from it to another engine is pretty difficult. And again, the engine costs money, so it might not be a good investment up front if you're going to switch from it at a later point anyway. Therefore, I think the sweet spot for engines to start with is Godot. It's free, the skills transfer from it really well, it's not that much more difficult than GameMaker Studio 2 to get started with, it installs easy and scales well, has everything you need built in except for an art program, and with free art programs like LibreSprite out there, you don't need much more. And that's really all you need to pick an engine. Literally, if you're going 3D, then pick between Unreal and Unity. If you're going 2D, then GameMaker Studio 2, Godot, and Unity. And when you're first starting, I recommend Godot because of the balance of being free, unlike GameMaker Studio 2, and easier to start with than Unity. But if you're interested in both 2D and 3D, then it's Unity all day long. And even Unity, especially if you're starting with 2D, isn't that much more difficult than Godot either. Now for the most important part of this whole video, the secret sauce. Choose a game engine. Seriously, the secret sauce is just making a choice. In the next 24 hours, you do yourself such a huge favor by just picking one. I said that everyone has ambition that the current them is incapable of, but is that true? Our parents all tell us that we can become anything, that we have infinite potential, that we are capable of any achievement, and then we go through a childhood of life continuing to beat on us, yell at us, convincing us that our parents lied to us, and after all of that, we become parents, and we tell our children the same thing. We become movie directors and we tell stories about the same thing. We become reporters and we scour the world finding proof of the same thing. Because deep down inside, we all know that we are capable of more. We all know we've been squandering our lives, spending our time like a spoiled rich kid spends his parents' money. We all know that we have so much more potential that we absolutely have to pass that message on to anyone that will listen. If only we could find some purpose, some reason to warrant the sheer willpower to awaken that potential, but we can't find it. So we give up on one thing and another, watching, reading, waiting for purpose. So don't let your search for a game engine get intertwined in your search for purpose. So many people get confused attempting to consume the answer they wish to find, and they do get an answer. It's just not the one for their question, and nobody can give them the question because the blessing and curse of free will is that you get to create it all by yourself. You want purpose, so you want to create something. You want to give it to the world, but you don't know what. So you ask others, what should I make? What engine should I use? Why am I alive? And my answer to you is just pick an engine. Start creating today. Start small and create something better every day. Push yourself, because in that striving, in that creation, I believe you'll create something inside of yourself as well. Different questions and different answers until one day, all of those efforts will fuse together and you'll find yourself staring at your own masterpiece. And you'll look inside of yourself and maybe, perhaps, you'll find the answer you've been looking for. Please like, subscribe, but most of all, comment. If you wish to give to this channel, you can buy me a coffee using the link for my coffee account in the description. But most of all, thank you so much for your time. I'm far more grateful to be a part of your search than I'm able to convey through time, space, and YouTube. I really wish for you to find everything you're looking for.